Hello everyone, Vincent is back, and of course I am here to share my story about my journey out of the Watchtower Society and how I became a follower of Christ. And as I always say, I am so excited to share my journey with as many people as possible. Well, what are we going to talk about today? Well, I said that we were going to continue our discussion of the last video. That video was called I Want to Be a Christian. That was part one. So if you haven't seen that, I encourage you to watch that video, and then you can come back to this one so you'll know what's going on here. If you remember how I went about this, I want to be a Christian, almost like a little kid who wants to be something when he grows up. Like, I want to be an engineer. So what do? They do A, B, and C, and they become an engineer. Well, that's kind of the way I felt when I left the Watchtower Society at that point. I didn't understand Jesus. I did not understand how a person really becomes a follower of Christ. I didn't understand that Christ is the one that finds you. Christ is the one that pulls you out of this world that you're lost in. No understanding of those things. So I just thought, well, I know the Bible. I did love God and Christ. So why not just continue on in this same path? And so I was looking for truth. Well, then, as I mentioned in that last video, that my friend, he introduced me to this group called Restoration Fellowship Church, and I left links in the last video in the description that you can see what they believe. And as I mentioned, and I won't have to repeat it, but their beliefs are very similar to Jehovah's Witnesses. And I thought, wow, there is no religion that teaches what Jehovah's Witnesses believe. At least that's what I thought, because that's what we were taught, wasn't it? That's a lie. So I decided, let's try this out. So I'm going to talk about how I felt when I went there, but first of all, let's just talk about the church itself, the Restoration Fellowship Church. Anything that I say, whatever I say is through my eyes, it's through my emotions, it's through my own experience. Especially at that time, I was still heavily indoctrinated. I was still scared when I went to this church. So anything that I say, it's not negative towards that church, and it's not negative about any of those people there. If it sounds negative, again, it's only because it's through my own eyes, my own feelings, and a lot of things affect. We're affected by different things. All of us are. So the things that affect me may not affect another person, say, who attends this church. So first of all, let's just get this out. If an ex-witness were to come to me and say, "Hey, Vincent, do you think that this church here will harm me if I go?" What would be my reply? Absolutely not. No, this church, the Restoration Fellowship Church, it is a zero control church. There is no governing body. There is no high control elders or pastors within this church. In fact, there are elders within these groups, but these elders are not like the Watchtower Society elders. These elders, they just make up their own, sermons from the Bible. They give their sermons and they encourage people. That's about it. They don't receive letters from no higher up. Now, this Restoration Fellowship is a branch of a particular type of religion. I want to say the Abrahamic faiths. So the founder of this Restoration Fellowship, his name was Anthony Buzzard, and you can find him online, and he talks a lot about various Bible subjects, especially that about the pre-existence of Jesus Christ. Did Jesus Christ pre-exist? He talks a lot about that. I met Anthony Buzzard a couple of times. He actually was in the area where I was twice, and I had the opportunity to talk to him. And I have to say, I viewed that as a wonderful privilege. Why? It's because that man is an extremely good person. He's a good person, he's a genuine person, and he is a happy person. And you can't help but like that man. Very humble as well. Very kind person. And in the area where I was, we didn't meet in a church building. They didn't have a building. Instead, we had to meet in various places, various halls that we rented, various other buildings we rented where this small group met. And there was about, I would say, 25, 30 people that met together in this group. And the one who took charge of the group, I remember he hated it when people viewed him as a pastor. No, he was just one that took the lead in the group, and he was a very kind man. Him and I would I would ride with him to various places where we were meeting, and just a very good person, kind, just average, normal person, nothing strange at all. In fact, the people there in this group, there was nothing weird about the group. Not at all. These people were just average. I met, as I said, ex-Jehovah's Witnesses. There was also other people that experienced the same thing as I did, and that was spiritual abuse from a high control religion, and they would come together at this place, the Restoration Fellowship Church. So the church itself, I find nothing wrong with it. So if somebody believed similar to what Jehovah's Witnesses believe as far as those things that I mentioned, and they wanted to go to that church, I would not have a problem with that person at all. I wouldn't really discourage it because it's not a bad place. There is, when I said zero control, what I mean is they have like these few basic doctrines, as I mentioned. They all believe that. But as far as other things, I mean, you're free. I mean, I would just raise my hand when I was there. They would ask, do you have anything to share, basically, from the scriptures? I would share my own thoughts about certain scriptures. The ones giving the sermons, they were just people from the audience. I mean, they had wanted to share something, so they would put together a sermon, and they would share what they discovered, all of their research. So there was nothing bad about it at all. There is complete freedom, and I know witnesses, they will be thrown off by this, but there was some even celebrated Christmas. There were some that celebrated Christmas, but there was a number of people that did not celebrate Christmas, especially ex-witnesses. Even some people that weren't ex-witnesses, they knew about the history of Christmas, the origin, so they refused to celebrate it. But you didn't look down on the person that did celebrate it either, because you have to allow for freedom within these groups. Otherwise, if you don't, what happens is you'll say, this is wrong, this is bad, this is bad, this is bad, this is good, this is good. And before you know it, you have a complex religion full of rules like the Watchtower Society. No, we were there for God and Christ. That's why we came together. It was not, we weren't there to get all instruction from some governing body, and we were not restricted in our thinking. So as far as a group goes, as far as a church goes, there is absolutely nothing wrong with this place. The one thing, though, that a person should look into is the pre-existence of Jesus Christ. Some may not agree with that, and so they may not want to go to that church. I did research on that, though, before I actually went, and my research, as I said, continues on from there. And yes, I do not believe that the man, Jesus Christ, pre-existed. And I'll have a lot to say about that a lot later. In fact, when I think about that, what I just said, I almost view that my journey through that church was just to learn that very thing, that Christ Jesus did not pre-exist, because that's pretty much all I got out of that group, because everything else was very similar to what Jehovah's Witnesses believe. But when it came to that, I grabbed hold of that, and it is such a deep subject, and it takes you places that you would never dream of, that are connected to that. And I do want to share some very interesting things that I have discovered along the way. In fact, some of the things that I expand upon, they were not even explained within the church, because sometimes you would run across a scripture that looked like it contradicted that, and you would ask people and they would say, well, I don't know about that. I just have questions about that particular verse. Well, now I understand all those verses that could not possibly be explained. It all makes sense now. And like I said, my understanding of things has grown even beyond that church. So I have no problems. That's really the point that I'm getting at. I have no problems with the people in the church. I have no problems with the one that took charge, or Anthony Buzzard, any of those individuals. Not at all. So anything that I say next is through my eyes, my feelings, because like I said, we're all different. And the things that affect me are like the environment, the atmosphere, especially at that time. I was listening to every word that people spoke, and it would affect me. And so a lot of that is why I'm not there today. So why am I not there? Okay, let's get to what people want to know. When I was there, you have to remember how if you were raised in the 80s and 90s, it really makes a difference in how you felt about the Watchtower Society compared to, say, if you were raised in the 2000s. Because in the 80s and the 90s, but especially the 80s, the Watchtower was at its peak performance. It was very powerful, you could say. I mean, in the 80s, the generation of 1914, they were older, but they were still young enough that you had some time there that you could believe that that generation would not pass away before the end. And so the Watchtower was teaching that, and if you were a witness, it seemed, plausible. So they had that going. Then they had this, you remember how they used to talk about all this? Well, they still do, but it's not true. They talked about all the abundance of spiritual food that God would provide. Well, we thought God provided these things, but of course he didn't. But every convention, you would have like 2 books, 1 brochure released. I mean, that's when the Insight books were released. That's when the Reference Bible came out. They were coming out with cassette tapes and later on CDs of, the entire reading of the Bible, CDs and cassettes of many books that they created. I mean, it was a time where you thought that you did have an abundance of spiritual food. It was moving fast. That organization was moving at with an accelerated rate, compared to today. I mean, it truly was at its peak performance. And then too, I mean, because of the generation of 1914, they could constantly be screaming Armageddon, Great Tribulation. Remember, they would talk a lot about the cry of peace and security. I mean, the Watchtower Society, when you were in, you thought that the Watchtower was very powerful. I mean, it felt powerful. It felt like a force to be reckoned with from the outside. You thought that people were conscious themselves of the Watchtower. You'd knock on doors. I mean, if you were indoctrinated anyway, you'd knock on doors, and if people hid in their house or didn't want to answer or argued with you, you thought, well, they just, they know we have the truth, but they're rejecting it because they don't want to face the truth. That's the way we felt. Of course, that wasn't true at all. Nobody really cared about Jehovah's Witnesses. Jehovah's Witnesses were just another church, in the neighborhood. No big deal. There were people that didn't even know what we believed, but we assumed that they did. All they knew is we didn't celebrate Christmas or whatever, but that's about it. A lot of people did not know the details of our beliefs, but we thought it was powerful. Where am I going with this? Well, I went to that church. Remember, I was indoctrinated, still getting over it. I was still scared of a lot of things. I would be sitting there and they would be talking. Someone would be giving a sermon, and we were not in an actual building, a church building. And I was just sitting there thinking to myself about, there's just no power here. Because I was used to the Watchtower. I mean, the only way I can compare it is the Watchtower Society was like going to a state fair. And now I'm in some local, a county fair. I mean, the power, was it just wasn't there for me. And that brought in a lot of uncertainty. Just it didn't seem like the world would even recognize this group. Like I said, with the Watchtower, you felt that the world recognized this group. But I'm sitting there thinking to myself, wow, is this one of those churches that I used to think about? When I was a Jehovah's Witness, I would drive by, those little churches. I mean, they even kind of look dumpy maybe, and it'll say, followers of Christ. Yeah. And then a couple blocks later, you'll see another little church that says, follow us, another, you'll just see all these little churches with different little names and all this stuff. And I would drive by those churches when I was a witness, and I would think, why would you ever go there? I mean, it's just a little building. Who knows about these people? I mean, who would you ever go knock on that door and think, oh, I need to come here because, you guys might have the truth? I mean, no, I of course not. And I used to drive by those churches and think, I'm so glad I don't go there. I'm so glad I'm in the Watchtower, because the Watchtower has power and these churches do not. At least that's what I thought. So here I was in this group, and I'm thinking, is this church like those other little churches that I used to pass by? It just felt so insignificant at this point. And I would just get depressed when I was there, just thinking of this. And at the same time, like I mentioned before, it felt forced. It felt like I was going here because, I didn't know anything else. I mean, I thought these doctrines were true, so I would go to this church. Then, too, I would hear little things. Now, again, this is not being negative about people. This is, being filtered through my mind. These are my emotions, my thoughts, and I just have to be honest. I would hear people, like one person said, in fact, he said this a couple of times to me at different times. He said, no, I always tell my wife, or my wife tells me that, if you hear of anything like, basically that starts to control you, because they were witnesses, then it's time to flee. It's time to run out the exit. And I'm thinking to myself, well, if that's the way you feel, then why are we here? And then someone else came to me, an ex-witness, and I asked him why he was there, and he said, well, I would like to believe that my entire life was not a waste. Now, what's funny is, even at that point, I mean, and I was still scared and everything, even at that point, after he told me that, I thought, is that really why I'm here? Because I don't want to think of my life as a waste. I'm thinking, that's not really a reason to be here. So I had these thoughts going through my mind. I remember one time we were coming back from a group, and, I'm just going to say, if I created a small Bible group, maybe 10, 15 people, and everyone was there, and we talked about the Bible. Let's say the next week nobody was there, and the next week there was only 2 people there. Yes, I would wonder, why are people not here? Aren't you going to come? All right. Well, I would that's kind of just a normal reaction, isn't it? It's like, you may even go up to those people like, what, you're not going to come to our Bible meeting anymore? Well, at this point, I was talking to someone, and someone said, I wonder why our meeting attendance is down. We need to get people to these meetings. That was a trigger for me. I am like, okay, why do I feel like I'm back in the Watchtower Society? Just hearing that. I mean, the church is nothing like the Watchtower Society, but I, at that point, thought, I don't want to feel obligated to meet with anybody, with any group. I can't handle that, is what I thought. But I kept going to this church. So I, and this happened over like a 6-month period of time. I would go for a while, and then I would miss some of these services, and then I would go back to a few other services. And the people were, like I said, the people were very kind, but it just felt empty to me. And now my next statement is going to sound negative, but remember, it is not a negative statement. It's just that I have to share the truth from the way it was back then. You know how at the Kingdom Hall, when you're learning about the scriptures and all of that, it was the Watchtower was a very knowledge-based religion. I mean, it's not spirit-based. I mean, when you're there, the Watchtower is always talking about accurate knowledge. I mean, they talk about the need to go out and service. They need to do this. I mean, it's all about works and all of that. It's not driven by spirit. It's not a spirited group. Well, that's kind of the way I felt when I was there. And I especially say that now with hindsight, and I'll tell you why. When I was there, people would give their sermons, but you couldn't declare what they said as truth anymore, because it wasn't like that. I mean, you had these few basic beliefs in common you believed were true, but now people are giving their opinions, and you just you viewed it differently. You couldn't just grab hold of that and say, okay, this is true. So when I was there, it just felt like, just knowledge. I mean, I was just learning, knowledge, and was the knowledge even completely correct? It didn't feel spirited, driven at the time. Okay, now I'm saying that with hindsight, because what church do I go today? Well, first of all, my family, we have chosen to go to a church on usually Saturdays, Saturday evening. It's called Lake City Church. It is a non-denominational church. But now, am I a member of that religion? No, I am not. I'm not a member of that church. Do I get involved with church activities? No, I do not. Do I feel the obligation to go to that church? No, I do not. Why do I go there? For a couple of reasons. One, the sermons. The sermons are so deep. They take you through like every book of the Bible. I mean, we went through all of the Gospels. We started at Genesis, and now we're deep into Genesis, and now they switched over. Now we're in a different series called The Jesus Way, and it's an in-depth study of how we should do things Jesus' way. And it's starting verse by verse, say through Matthew and the other Gospels, the Sermon on the Mount, all of that. Then in January, I think we're going to go back to the book of Genesis and start through there. But every time I leave that church, I always have something that I learned. I mean, something deep, a piece of knowledge I never thought of. And it's not just knowledge. I mean, I leave that church. I mean, I feel God's Spirit when I'm there. I feel God's Spirit when I come home. I am so encouraged. And a part of that too is their music. They play live music. I mean, we're talking drums, keyboards, guitar, bass, you name it. And the music is so powerful. In fact, I find it almost more powerful than what I find on Spotify as far as gospel music. I mean, it is, every time you go there, I cannot help to have tears in my eyes just listening to that music. It is amazing. So I feel that whole part of the sermon, the music, I feel it in me that I have God's Spirit, and it's driving me there, and I feel that I have God's Spirit after I'm there. I did not feel that way with the other church. Now, some would say, well, and like I have said earlier, maybe it's because I was still scared, heavily indoctrinated, but I'll tell you I have an opinion about that. And I believe it's more than that, though. I believe it is, in some ways, knowledge-based. It just, even the people there, now again, it's going to sound negative, but all the people were loving people. But at the time, they looked like me. The way they would talk to me, they were talking as if they felt the same way as me. I mean, it seemed like so many came from a religion that experienced spiritual abuse, and they just seemed uncertain in themselves. They had a lot of uncertainty about even being there. I mean, they just didn't seem like this well-founded group of people that was sure about what they know and where they are going. They just look like me in my mind. And that's the way I felt even then. I'm like, and I was scared. And I seen it in other people as well. It almost looked like, like a desperate attempt to fill in a void, like I was doing. Now, maybe I'm seeing it completely wrong. Someone from the church, of course, would say, "Hey, Vince, you're not. This isn't right. This is not the way it is." But it is the way I felt when I was there, and after experiencing what I have experienced, later on I'll talk about, as I mentioned before, how Christ found me. Once I experienced that, and of course now that I go to that church to listen to the sermon and all, I see a difference between what I'm experiencing today and what I experienced then. So anyway, at this point, I I listened to a lot of things people were saying, and I finally decided that, I just can't do this. Everything seemed forced. It felt like I was desperate to fill in that void. So eventually I just kind of slowly disappeared and I didn't go back to the church. So what I did was at that point is I went back to that Bible Hub and all my research online, and now I was looking at doctrines. I want to know about hellfire, the kingdom, paradise, earth. I wanted to learn all of these different things. So I would go online and I'd be studying these different doctrines, right? Okay. Then I would read this and think, okay, that sounds correct. Yeah, okay, I believe that. And then I would go to another article and like, well, I'm going to change how I believe about this because I think this is correct. And then I'm like, okay, this is true here. And then I would look at another doctrine. Okay, yeah, that's true too. That's true too. And what happened one day, I was on the computer. I may have been on my phone, and I'm like, I can't do this anymore. I thought, what am I doing? Am I just looking up stuff online? Am I looking up various teachings and then finding out what I want to declare as truth? What am I doing? Am I making up my own religion? Is what I was thinking. Like, how do I even know this is true or that's true? Why am I doing this? And then I realized that what I was doing was trying to fill in that void. And it just seemed pointless at that time to even continue on in this research. So I thought, okay, I'm done with this. And I thought to myself, I'm going to put God and Christ on a shelf because I don't know what to do. I don't even know what to look at. I didn't know what research to do. I mean, what am I looking for? Jehovah's Witnesses, they've always said, you read the scripture, Jesus Christ is the way, the truth, and the life. But you didn't understand what that meant. And I think I may have mentioned it in the last video, how, you thought that, okay, Jesus is the truth, but who is he using to teach truth? What is the truth? And you're thinking doctrines. You're thinking like, what does the future hold? You're thinking what happens to us at death? You're thinking what is the kingdom? You're thinking doctrines and where you can find truth. Well, truth was always there in plain sight. What is the truth? Jesus Christ is the truth. That's what the scripture said. You could not see it. You were blinded by the Watchtower, who believed that they are the truth, not Jesus Christ. And so as an ex-witness at that time, I had no idea what that even meant. Jesus is the truth. No concept of it whatsoever. It never came to mind. All I could think of was, okay, where do I find the truth? So finally, I just let go of all research and I thought to myself, I'm going to put God and Jesus on a shelf. And I didn't really say an official prayer, but I kind of said, God, I just can't do this anymore. I'm going to put them on the shelf, and then I am going to take them down from the shelf when it happens naturally. It must be organic, I thought. I am not even ever going to force those things in my life anymore. I'm done. Well, what happened at that time? I began to live my own life at that time. What I thought at that moment was, I don't even know who I am. Who am I? I mean, what are my desires? I need to do what I've always wanted to do. I needed to follow my heart. And where that was going to take me, I had no idea. But that was my decision at that time because I was lost, did not know what to do. So I put God up there. And what happened next? Well, I did what I said I would do. Follow my heart. And where did that lead me? That took me to a place of darkness for some time. And I want to share that in my next video. What happened to me? What was my thinking like? How did I, have both thoughts running through my head? Was I thinking of God and my own desires at the same time? I mean, what was happening? Because at that time, I mean, if you look at who I was during this time period and you look at me today, or if you even thought about my past, you would think, who is this guy? What's going on in Vincent's head? Because he's completely different now than what he was before. So in my next video, we're going to talk about my plunge into darkness. All right, well, we're going to conclude the video there, but make sure you listen to the next video. You may find it very strange because all this time I've been talking about God and Jesus and how much I love them. Well, in the next video, it's not going to be so much about those things. So please watch it because it all ties in with the idea in the end how I did not choose this path at all. And so that's really, again, why I want to share my journey. It wasn't something that I chose to make me happy. I did not say, I want to be a Christian and, I'm going to make this happen. No, did not go down that way. All right, until that next video, like, subscribe, share, and I do appreciate all of you that share these videos with people. I don't make money off these things and I never will. I don't really care about the money. I want to get the message out. I want to help people see, especially ex-witnesses, that they need to give Christ a chance. And if they really want Christ, Christ will come to them, but they have to be patient. All right, we'll see you in the next video.